Several Tulsa religious leaders are back from the Mexican border. They went there to see firsthand the Central American migrants who are showing up in large numbers seeking asylum. Their views on who makes up this group of people and why they are seeking to enter the U.S. differs greatly from the White House.
The pictures of American law enforcement firing tear gas into Mexico at migrants who rushed a fence separating the two countries has become the view many Americans now have of what is going on along the border. As more and more Central American migrants arrive at the border every day, for most it really means sitting along Mexican streets, as fewer than 100 of their asylum claims are being processed each day. Wanting to get a first-hand look at what is really going on along the border, 4 religious leaders from Tulsa drove to El Paso. They walked the Santa Fe International Bridge and visited the tent compound outside Tornillo, Texas, where now more than 2,300 teenage boys and girls, most from Central America, are being detained. The highly guarded facility was supposed to be closed by mid-December and was originally intended to house less than 400 children. But the size of the facility just keeps growing.
And tried to get into the encampment to see for ourselves, but it was completely blocked where we couldn't see, and we were told that it was federal property that we could not step foot onto.
Stephanie Marshall is the Director of Education Outreach and Programming at Temple Israel in Tulsa.
It just confirmed that, for me, that this is not the way to treat other human beings, and something needs to be done, because what they're going through is not acceptable. These people are not trying to get into America because they want the American dream. They are fleeing a nightmare. And I think those are nightmares that we can't even begin to understand. They are fleeing for their lives.
Aliyah Shimmy is Executive Director of Tulsa Metropolitan Ministry, an interfaith organization. This was the second time she's gone to the border.
I would hope that people would get up and go seek those facts for themselves as well. Stop listening to rote information that's being fed to you, right? Get up and actively try and seek those facts out like we have.
During their time at the tent compound, they faced a group of people who were protesting in favor of locking up immigrant children.
Being encountered by people who are anti-protesters, I guess you can say, and just some of their thoughts and comments that they had, just vile comments. I can't imagine human beings who would want children to be treated that way. One of the stories we heard of a mother who was traveling with 3 of her children with an infant. Her brother was killed, and she was going to be next, along with her children. She would rather freeze and stay on the bridge than go back and be killed in Honduras. Why would we tear gas those people?
Jesse Ulrich is Director of Learning and Engagement for the Jewish Federation of Tulsa.
The dream of America exists as long as America exists, so the idea that we can be a more humane and just society is always there for me. I can no longer be passive in that.
Ulrich is in charge of Holocaust education for much of Oklahoma. In that role, he tells the story of the ship St. Louis.
A boat of Jewish refugees from Germany trying to get into Cuba. And while on their way to Cuba, their visas are denied, and they spend a couple days trying to get into the United States and Canada. And they even take the boat up parts of the Florida coast. And no one took them in. And they had to go back to Nazi-occupied Europe, and most of them were sent to a concentration camp and murdered.
Chris Moore is lead pastor at Fellowship United Church of Christ in Tulsa. He too makes the point that people need to remember this is not the first group of immigrants to show up at the border seeking asylum.
That's happened multiple times before. And so that's not unique in and of itself. We simply are kind of holding that up as a unique story. Maybe out of our ignorance of the past, or maybe out of some other motivation for that.
Moore says Americans are blessed to live in what we believe is the greatest country on earth. But along with that great blessing comes great responsibility.
You can't be the greatest country on earth and not expect people to want to come to the greatest country on earth, particularly when they're in a place they don't perceive as the greatest country on earth.
The 4 religious leaders who viewed the Mexican border agree there needs to be border security, but there has to be a better way, they say, than building walls, deploying soldiers, or firing tear gas to deal with immigrants fleeing for their lives.
I don't deny that we need immigration laws and there does need to be a process, but it needs to treat people much more humane than it is and look at the individual person.
The problem with immigration in this country is that it's become more complicated, not less.
Especially when this country was set up by immigrants. I can't understand, as massive as our country is, as much space as there is in our country, I cannot fathom why our government would be doing this.
It's really important that people who make policies then also have some space in their process to go see what happens when that policy is actually applied to real human beings.
There are now reports that some migrants are accepting free plane rides back to their homes after living in the squalor that is a sports arena in Tijuana. 6,000 people are living in the arena with only 35 toilets. Mexican health officials say there are cases of tuberculosis, chickenpox, skin infections, and confirmed cases of HIV/AIDS.